I'm Tom, and welcome to Inside Surfing.
I'm Shannon. Inside Surfing is a series of shows where we'll be exploring the world of surfing.
On today's program, I'll be interviewing Steve Pezzman, the publisher of Surfer Magazine and world-renowned expert on the history of surfing in California and Huntington Beach.
And I'll be talking to Peter Townend, former world surfing champion and advertising director for Surfing and Bodyboarding Magazine.
So stay tuned for
Inside Surfing.
Hi, this is Dick Dale from the Huntington Beach International Surfing Museum. We all know that Huntington Beach is the mecca of surfing history, and this heritage is worth saving not only to you, but to your children. Please contribute to the Huntington Beach International Surfing Museum. The address is P.O. Box 782, Huntington Beach, California, 92648, and you can call area code 714-536-9326. And remember, the surf is always up.
Welcome back to Inside Surfing. Joining us today is Steve Pezzman, the publisher of Surfer Magazine, who will share with us a little bit about the history of surfing in California and Huntington Beach. Steve, could you share with us, please, when surfing first came to the west coast of the United States and who brought it here and who was involved in the sport?
Sure. Surfing, of course, began in Hawaii and came here with a gentleman named George Freeth in 1907, who was brought here by Henry Huntington, who was promoting a railroad trunk line to Redondo Beach that ran from Los Angeles. And there was very little reason for people from Los Angeles to take his railroad to the beach in Redondo back in that period, and so he imported George Freeth to give surfing demonstrations in the surf there. George had just, prior to coming to California, been a principal in the resurrection of surfing in the Hawaiian Islands. It had been suppressed by the missionaries there. And he was a life-saving hero in California. He developed a squad of Gremmy's young surfers. They weren't surfers when they met him, but he turned them into surfers. He brought a surfboard with him from Hawaii. He made some more boards while he was here. They were very crude, relatively crude to today's boards, just planks of wood primarily. And so the surf culture really began from that point. Now there's another theory to the first surfer in California that's more of myth or legend than a fact, but it's supposed that a Hawaiian prince visited Santa Cruz in the late 1800s and surfed there and demonstrated the sport of surfing there. And that fact has not been published or promoted as much as the George Freeth story. My personal guess would be that both those things happened, and that but Freeth was really the kickoff to the sport in California.
What was happening in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s in surfing in California?
Well, the sport was flourished in various stages from the point of Freeth's introduction in 1907. Through the teens and 20s, I would say there were probably 50, maybe 60 or 70 surfers on the coast. And just prior to the 30s, there was actually a rather significant event for surfing in Orange County and in Southern California. And that was Duke Kahanamoku coming here from Hawaii to visiting Corona del Mar at the harbor entrance to Newport Bay in 1927, and bringing his surfboard and surfing the waves at Corona del Mar jetty, and inspiring some men in that area, young men. I say that because children that now practice this sport at that time could not deal with the surfboards, which weighed between 100 and 200 pounds. So it was really a young man's activity. And Duke inspired some of the locals there to build boards. And the first West Coast Surfing Championship was held in Newport Beach, I believe, in 1933. And the next year was taken to Huntington Beach, where it was held. And there was the first lifeguard at Huntington Beach, Bud Higgins, and the first surfer in Huntington Beach was one of the characters of that period. So during the 20s, the sport spread a little bit and became somewhat entrenched in the South Bay area. By the early 30s, it had spread to San Diego, the Sunset Cliffs area. Paddleboard Cove developed a surf culture, Manhattan Beach Pier. I believe Malibu about that time began to be surfed. Tom Blake claims to be one of the first individuals to surf, or the first person to go to Malibu with someone else and surf it. I can't remember the date, but it was in that era. The people that surfed in that period were much different than the surfers of today. They were young men. They were fairly fit because of the weight and nature of surfing equipment. And they were, in a sense, rather bohemian compared to the other segments of culture in that time. Surfing had not yet taken on the trappings of a subculture in a mass appeal way. But the surfers of that period were very much worshiping the life values of living in the tropics in Hawaii, where the surf was the best. And they basically had some means to, they were either extremely eccentric and didn't work at all, or they had some money because they got to Hawaii, they saw the sport, or they were introduced to the sport by someone here. But they were generally, they were engineers, doctors, or bohemian types. But all of them were kind of a special breed, slightly eccentric, you might say, because surfing at the time was, you had to be a little different to do it. Didn't have a lot of the popular, compelling peer group involvement reasons that it has today.
Steve, we sure appreciate the history that you've talked about and shared with us. What do you see for the year 2000?
Marked change from the sport of today. But we're in that direction now, and that direction finally came to us in the 80s. Equipment has really affected this way the sport has evolved. Equipment and human values, but equipment has had a profound effect. And longboards of the 60s were rather ponderous, and the equipment prior to the foam and balsa boards of the late 50s and 60s were even more ponderous. And in the mid-60s, there was a breakthrough to the shorter, lighter surfboards, and they became pocket rockets, mine vehicles that that were very spontaneously articulated on the wave. As you thought of something to do, you could do it with the board. Just, boy, wham, bam, spontaneous movement. It's going to get more so as we go to the year 2000. In the last 5 years, we've left the wave. We're now getting air. We're flying off the face of the wave and doing re-entries. We're doing things that 20 years ago surfers would not have believed. I think equipment is going to lead that progression. Surfboards have gone from 150 pounds to 6 pounds. I don't think they're going to get lighter, but I think they're going to become multi-laminate objects that have hard, rigid surfaces where they want to be hard on the bottom, that have soft, flexible areas in the nose and entry, and hard, rigid areas in the tail. Tom Morey, the inventor of the bodyboard, the flexible foam bodyboard, said he thought that they were going to develop whiskers and lashes, little fixtures where they want to be. But I think they're going to be even more spontaneous, more radically maneuverable, and more expensive.
Steve, I know you're personally interested and concerned about the preservation of the sport of surfing for future generations. Could you elaborate on your own personal interests and goals and what you're doing right now?
It's finally happening that a museum In fact, there's several museum locations, there's several organizations along the coast of California that are striving to collect surfing and important memorabilia concerning the sport. There's one in North San Diego County, there's one in the Ventura-Oxnard area, and there's one that I'm personally involved with in Huntington Beach called the Huntington Beach International Surfing Museum, and we formed a foundation and we're working to establish a significant surfing museum adjacent to Huntington Pier. And we have the cooperation of the California State Department of Parks and Rec, and we have the cooperation of the city of Huntington Beach, and we have the interest and participation of a number of very gifted and capable individuals. And I think the combination of interest from all these powers and individuals is going to actually make this museum happen. I'm very excited about it, and its time has finally come.
Steve, I want to thank you for sharing with us your insights as to the history and the evolution of the sport of surfing here in the west coast of California, and especially Southern California. We appreciate your comments.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Talk about it, a lot of energy to encourage these people not to drink and drive and drive and drink. Because after all, I'm on the road too.
Come on, Mark, let me drive. Forget it. I'm driving.
Come on, Mark, let Jesse have the keys.
Give me the key.
No way!
What kind of friend are you?
Look, give him the keys. Please.
Welcome back to Inside Surfing. Today our guest is Peter Townend, a world surfing champion and advertising director for Surfing and Bodyboarding magazine. We're here at the Huntington Pier and we're going to be talking about international surfing. Hi Peter.
How are you doing, Shannon? It's been a long time.
How's the surf doing today?
Actually, I just came in. It's fun today. It's a little foggy, as you can see behind. We can't really see it right now, but it's about 4 feet, some 5-foot sets, and it's good to get in the water. Nice, refreshing start to the day.
As a professional surfer, you've traveled around the world many times. Tell me, how did the International Pro Surfing Tour start?
Well, even before the pro thing happened, there wasn't any real definition between amateurs and pros. In the early 60s and through the 60s, just at the beginning of the 70s, it was the World Amateur Surfing Championships, and everybody used to kind of go in all their regional events and their national events to go to the World Championships. I remember, well, actually the first one was in Australia in 1964, won by Midget Farrelly, and a couple of Californians, L.J. Richards, and a few of the other guys went down for that. And then every 2 years they would hold the World Amateur Championships, and that was like the big deal. In '66, Nat Young came here to California in San Diego, and that's where I began to get involved. In the late '60s, I started to compete back in Australia, and eventually I got to a point where I got on the Australian team and came to California in '72 for the World Championships they had in San Diego at Ocean Beach, and I picked up a third down there behind Jimmy Blears from Hawaii and David Nueva, and that kind of launched my international surfing career. And then about that same time, there started to come into money contests in Hawaii. They had the Smirnoff, and which really began in Santa Cruz, but they moved it over to Hawaii. And of course, the Duke had been already up and running for some time on ABC Wide World of Sports, and everybody kind of used to focus on Hawaii and those contests at the end of the year. I mean, I remember even you being there in quite a few seasons surfing in the women's divisions of those events, and then a few of us, like the early pioneers of tennis, kind of, well, you know, hey, we're going to all these contests, we're going to these countries like South Africa and our home country Australia and Hawaii. We should have some link all these things together and add up the points and figure out who the champion is, you know, because there was no real champion. The unofficial champion every year was the guy that won the Smirnoff, and that didn't seem really fair, you know, that one guy could be the champion on one contest.
Right.
And so we looked at what was happening with tennis and Formula One motor racing and said, well, let's try and figure out a way to do it. So, you know, a bunch of us got together with Randy Rarick and Fred Hemmings was really trying to get surfing on the map. He'd been a former world champion in '68, and he kind of put together the IPS, which was the predecessor to the ASP, which we have today. And at the end of 1976, Fred and Randy added up the points on a piece of paper, and I won. And and a real funny story about that is that. It seems now it's over a decade later and things seem so sophisticated now. The ASP has an office and there's press releases and telexes and all this publicity. And back then, here they added up the points and Fred called me up and said, "Hey Peter, you're the champion. Well, why don't you come into Honolulu and I'll buy you lunch," So I go into Honolulu and he takes me to the Outrigger Canoe Club, and the reporter from the Honolulu Advertiser turns up and says, "Well, we need a picture. And where's the trophy?" And Fred goes, "Well, we don't really have a trophy." But wait a minute. So he walks over to the trophy cabinet in the Outrigger Canoe Club and he takes one out of the cabinet, turns it around the other way and takes this picture of me and him holding the trophy. Then he took the trophy back off me and put it back in the cabinet, and all I have to show for being world champion is this photo of Fred and I with the trophy. And to really show you how far the sport has come in that development on an international scale, just in the last 30 days I've been back in Australia and I went to the ASP banquet. And here it was in Sydney at the Sheraton Wentworth Hotel. Everybody's in tuxedos, people arriving in limousines, and it's just, it actually feels really good. To see where it's come. It might seem like, you missed the boat and you missed out and you didn't make the big checks. My earnings that year were $26,500. Guys like Curran and Carroll and Damien win that in one contest now, But it felt good to be there and see that at least you contributed. You were the starting point to see, because we really believed that we were athletes, and nobody else did back those days. Myself and Mark Warren and Ian Cairns developed the Bronzed Aussies with trying to picture surfers as athletes, and we took a lot of crap for it, particularly here in America, when surfing in the 70s was still very underground. Soul surfing was still a big thing,
Peter, you've been actively involved in coaching the amateurs, preparing them for tough competition. What's happening with the World Amateur Championships? Where is it going to be held, and what's going on with it?
Well, as I was saying in the beginning, the World Amateur Championships, it really wasn't amateur or pro in those days. It was just the World Championships, and it kind of went out of style, and they didn't even run it for what was maybe 8 years there in the 70s, and then it started to come back again, and they had it. And I was actually involved in a coaching level in a couple of those World Championships. In '82 at Burleigh Heads, I took Tom Curran and the American team down there and he won it. And then here at Huntington in '84, Scott Farnsworth won the championship. And the World Amateur Championship has really started to come back as a symbol for young people to strive for before they go into their professional career. The World Championships were just held in Puerto Rico this year, and it was probably one of the best ones ever. It was on the 20th anniversary of when Fred Hemmings won it in '68, and it was won by a Brazilian, which was a first, and it just shows how far the sport's come in. But they had like 50,000 people on the beach in Puerto Rico to see the contest, and it was a big deal. They had a parade through the streets of San Juan with ticker tape parade, and it was really a good coming together. See, the difference between amateur surfing on that level and pro is that the amateur thing's more nationalistic. You're representing your country. It's like the Olympics of surfing, and whereas the pro thing's a money thing. It's more an individual thing. Everybody is a little nationalistic, but you're not there representing your country as much as you're trying to represent your own pocketbook,
So what are you doing now, Peter?
Well, after I got through that period of coaching with the NSSA, Surfing Magazine came and offered me a job to go and work in the advertising sales department. And it was interesting because the publisher, Bob McNona, and I were very old friends. We'd lived beside each other in Hawaii in 1973 for 4 months, and so we'd kept in touch, and he'd kept an eye on me, and we'd stayed friends. But I'd really felt, with having coached the Americans to 2 World Championships, I kind of reached a pinnacle there, and all of a sudden I really wasn't looking for something, but they came and asked me, and they made it real attractive, and so I took the job. And I started just in the ad department, and gradually I've built my way up, and now I'm the advertising director, and I have 5 people working for me. And in that same period, we've developed a new magazine called Bodyboarding, which is just a rapidly developing sport. The small boogie boards that you see all the kids down here with blackball, and the magazine's doing phenomenally well. And Surfing Magazine, of course, the father figure of the publishing concern's doing great. I mean, all you got to do is take a look at the current issue on the newsstand to see how great it's doing. I mean, it's over 200 pages, and which shows I'm doing a good job. But if there's one thing I miss from all that coaching stuff that I got involved in with the NSSA after Bronze Aussies is working with the kids. I mean, I felt real good about myself imparting some of the knowledge onto kids and then seeing them do well. I mean, Mike Parsons, who's now in the top 16, I worked really closely with. I mean, I worked with Curran for a couple of years too, and also Gerlach, but more with Mike from day one. When he first got on the NSSA national team, he was this freckly-faced little kid from Laguna Beach, and now he's like one of the best surfers in the world, and you feel proud about that. And I haven't forgot that, so I'm still doing a little community coaching with the Huntington Beach High School surf team. We have a little program on Tuesday mornings called Camp PT, which I put them through their paces, and actually I'm developing some very unique coaching methods doing that. I'm doing stuff now with those kids that we never did during the NSSA, which I tell you some people could use right now, because this last World Championships actually the Americans didn't do so well. I mean, the Australians dominated. I mean, a Brazilian won the men's, but overall the Australians were the dominant nation by far.
And you also have a television show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Wave Watch?
Yeah, I have a show that's just started off the same way this did. We decided we wanted actually John Bass started a show. He was a surfer, and he felt surfing didn't get us adjusted, and I wasn't really the host at first. Paul Thompson, Sean's brother, was, and I was a guest, and John thought, hey, you did a good job as a guest, why don't you try to be the host? And that was, I think, like the 4th show. We've now done 94 shows, and we've been on the air now 6 years. And
well, when can we catch Wave Watch?
Well, here in Huntington Beach, you can catch it on Rogers Cable System. It's on Channel 30 at Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and it's come a long way. It's a lot different to the early days. It now encompasses a lot more than just local news. I mean, we have Mark Fu in Hawaii. We're currently doing stuff from New Jersey, and we have the best surfers in the world, plus a lot of other interesting guests. I mean, we've had people like Kurt Rambis from the Lakers, who's a bodyboarder. We've had actors like Gregory Harrison, Don Stroud, lots of different people from the industry, and it's a fun show.
Well, thank you for being on the show today, Peter. You've been a great asset to the sport, and I'm sure we're going to see you around another time on the show here. So thanks for coming.
Well, let's go surfing sometime. That's what it's all about. I still get stoked going surfing, as you can tell as I came out of the water this morning.
All right, thanks, Peter. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back on Inside Surfing.
Sometimes you know you're the one everybody's counting on to do the job. Whether you're a player or a fan. The one who can step in and turn things around so everybody wins. We lose too many lives when fans drive after drinking too much. So before you go to the game, choose the one guy you can count on to drive home. The designated driver. When you think about it, that's your most valuable player.
We'd like to thank our guests today, Peter Townend and Steve Pezzman, for being on our show.
And we'd also like to thank you for joining us on this very first show of
Inside Surfing.